Everybody, thank you for joining us for the 2.4.1 MFTF demo in person and on BlueJeans. Appreciate it. I hope it's going to be nice and educational for everybody about the new feature that we have in 2.4.1. So 2.4.1, let's just dive right in. It's a patch release, but it is a patch release with a pretty important addition to it. XSD Schema validation is now enabled by default in the following MFTF commands, right? So generate tests, run failed, and run group. Your main running and generation commands are all going to have that enabled by default. So what does that mean? That means that if you have XSD violations, generate tests will now throw an error and return with an exit code of non-zero to tell you that there's problems with test generation, which is good. However, with that being added added as on by default, we actually also added the debug option, also -d. That takes a couple different arguments depending on backwards compatibility requirements, essentially. So it's going to be 3 different possible options there. It's going to be default, which is the same as not specifying D, which just runs XSD validations on a fully merged file. And what a fully merged file here means is that we're not running XSD validation on individual files unless you go with this developer option, because it takes a pretty big hit on generation performance and generation time. So again, by default, pretty quick, easy addition. If you have XSD validations, it'll show you, and I'll demo it here in a second. But it won't give you the file name. If you need the file name and you can't find the validation very easily, you can add the developer option, which again runs them on individual files. And again, that's going to be very slow, especially with the amount of files that or test material files that exist in CE, EE, B2B, etc. But this is a last resort if you can't find it manually. And there's some tricks to be able to find it manually that I'll show you in a second. There's also the debug option none. So it doesn't run XSD validation on files at all. And under bold right here, it should only be used for backwards compatibility. If for some reason, like extension developers, whenever we deliver 2.4.1 to the develop branches that we use internally, we're going to fix all of the XSD validations. However, if you guys want to bump up to MFTF 2.4.1 and above, while you guys are working on your own tests, you will definitely probably want to use this with some older versions of the test code base that were released with XSD violation errors. So again, I'll show how all 3 of these different options work right now even.
I can add something to this.
Sure.
Right after we released, even before we released it, we went to Magento code and we, in 2.3 develop and 2.2 develop branches, we fixed all of this XSD schema violation. So those 2 branches currently working properly and you don't need to worry about this. The only issues you will see on already released Magento code. That's why we have this debug on.
Yep. The idea is for the flag to be on at all times so that the test code base stays nice and clean. But since this is a patch release and we understand that people might want to use it against older code bases, you just want to keep everybody supported for as long as possible. Okay, cool. So let me just make some changes to this DevDocs test right here. This is the one that's included with the MFTF code base, and I'm on standalone right now. I'm not attached to the Magento code base, only for ease of demoing this and keeping it nice and short. So I have this test right here. I'm just going to change this to am on pages, or just add in some extra stuff right there, just to break it essentially. I'm going to do it in generate tests -f just to skip the do force iteration, so that I don't care about the modules over order. And I'm not going to provide any debug flag at all. So this is what you guys are going to be seeing as the normal behavior. So right here, schema validations files found in XML files. So right here, pretty easy to see failure schema validation error element am on pages with a bunch of garbage after it, not expected on line 21 of this file, right? So again, pretty fast feedback. With the full Magento code base, it still doesn't add that long on the normal generation time, which is ideal, which is the reason why we do it on the merged file as opposed to the individual file. So if I see right here, this is pretty easy to search for an entire code base. You can just going to copy into it. You can just search the entire dev test directories for this specific element, which was obviously a typo. And you can see it's on the log file as well as the dev.txt file. So now I know that I have to fix that. Yep. Let me add the debug flag for developer. So this is not going to take very long at all on the attached code base, because again, there's not a lot of files to run the validation on. But you can see that with developer, it says there's a failure. However, the actual exception message is going to tell you exactly what file it has a problem in. This can be pretty useful if you're wanting to just work with your own extension, or aside from the code base itself. What you can do is you can just keep MFTF on its standalone, go to dev test functional, and then add in the extension, or symlink the extension under here, kind of similar to how DevDocs lives. That will allow you to basically only run this validation on your extension files, even though generation will fail later, probably for other reasons. At the very least, you can see if there's going to be XSD validation errors there. And lastly, let's not fix that. I'm going to change it from developer to none. And you see the generate test generated just fine, even though this is probably going to be bunk PHP that's not actually going to be able to run. If for some reason there's some smaller violation, like in a page, for example, or rather a section, if I type whatever here, wrong attribute value, but since type is not actively used in generation, this will mean that you can still run the test just fine. And I think that some of the validation that we had on 2.3 develop and 2.2 develop were
Also, then yes.
Yeah, more benign validation errors that didn't actually cause any test running problems. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to be checked in. But for the health of the code base in the end. Cool. That is the meat and potatoes of 2.4.1. Minor bug fix. It's not really even worth mentioning. It was just it was to help support this XSD schema validation, but you guys can read on in the changelog if you're so curious. Do you have any questions from audience or anybody here in this room about the 2.4.1 content?
I got a question.
Please.
Very new to Adobe and Magento. Cool. So can you just talk a little bit about maybe what the generate test command does and how the XSD schema comes into play?
Sure, sounds good. So generate tests does a couple things, right? It'll and if somebody else, if I miss anything, please do add on to it. It's basically what it does is before it does, it's going to read all of the XML files that are in the disparate folders within Magento. Over here, let me get an example here. So you have a Magento module. Let me make this a little easier to kind of tell. You have a Magento module. I think this is called a catalog that I had open. Mm-hmm. You can have your test folder inside it, and then there's going to be MFTF. Yeah. Which has these separate different folders inside it, which all have a bunch of XML files that are the disparate test materials, right? So it'll find all of these and then read these, but it'll read them and then it'll do validation on them, but it'll also ping Magento to see which modules are enabled and then exclude certain modules from this merging and resolution order, right? So let's say for some reason my Magento instance didn't have catalog, MFTF is not going to, MFTF is not going to use catalog in generation. Okay. So like tests and deltas that might alter other test workflows will not be there. Okay. That is kind of it. And then obviously it'll encode all of those into objects, and then the framework will do its own magic, and then it'll output PHP at the end of the day. Cool. Anything else important about that?
I think you got everything.
So the XML just defines details about the test that needs to be run?
It defines the test
everything. The pages, sections, elements, data, metadata, how to create an MPs, web API, and also the test. Mm-hmm. So literally everything regarding.
But there's not like PHP in the test of each section.
It's abstracted out.
The framework will generate that.
Exactly. Okay. I don't know. Depending on how new you're here, I have the admin login test. This is like the canonical first test that we ever wrote. It's a pretty simple test, but you can kind of tell what the workflow here is. It goes to a page, fills in a field, clicks, closes admin login notification, and then sees that the current URL has been redirected.
This is very much like driving a web page with Selenium or something, but you're using XML direct.
Exactly.
MFTF XML to tell it what to do.
Pretty much.
Selenium's the last part of it that
Right,
actually control it, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's all abstracted away, so you don't have to think about any of
Okay.
that.
Very cool.
Yep.
Yeah, that light bulb.
The other big thing that this affords us in XML, because obviously writing in a native language is pretty much 9 times out of 10 going to be easier than writing in like this weird abstracted language, right? Is let's say I needed to do something else in this test. Let's say that I added in password 2 as a field, so now users have 2 passwords. So basically, is you do another fill field if my computer would respond well.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do a new fill field, and then you say fill in for my new field right here. Selector, I'm just going to do blah. Doesn't matter for right now. However, there's this before and after attributes right here. Let's say I wanted to fill in before or after the password fill in. What you can do is actually copy the step key over here, which is a reference to this action.
Yeah, sweet.
Yep.
So that's ordering, and maybe you have ways to do conditionals and stuff like that.
No,
Conditionals are
no,
mostly
no.
based on the module resolver order, right? So let's say that my extension is the one that adds in this new field.
Yeah.
If it's not enabled, if it is enabled in Magento, it's going to include that delta. If it's not enabled in Magento, it actually will keep the test flow completely clean of it.
Cool.
That's how that's how that kind of conditional, like if this is enabled, do this. If that is enabled, do that, is built in.
Sweet.
Cool. Good questions though. Cool. Do we have any other questions internally here, externally? I can't see the comments on my screen right now for some reason, but
I don't see any comments externally.
One more. Yeah. So these schemas are hosted on Magento somewhere.
they're in MFTF. So MFTF is a Magento dependency that you can declare via the composer file right here.
Okay. Yeah.
And let me see. I'm trying to require dev. Oh no, I composer removed it because I was testing something.
Okay.
But it's essentially in the composer file that'll tell you which MFTF version is. So like as we add actions, so like if you want to add a new action to MFTF, you would add it to the schema.
Yeah.
And then you would need to bump up the Magento version or MFTF version 2.
Right. Right. So you don't have to go to the internet to do this. You
Yes,
could
sir.
make up your own schema, I suppose.
One thing to note on that is the schema location up here is it's dictated via URN as opposed to a hard-coded path or something like that.
Okay.
That's the only additional thing you need to do to be able to use the schemas. It's a generate URN catalog command or something like that. It's the same thing that Magento does,
Sure.
essentially.
Very helpful.
Yeah, great questions though. Good stuff. Anything else?
Just one more thing to add, we've also enabled XSD validations on the Jenkins side. We
Yes.
used a new parameter called mftf underscore
Mm-hmm.
debug underscore level. So you can actually change or toggle between the control, between the different debug levels through your Jenkins builds as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, some of you guys external may have access to this pipeline, so this shouldn't be anything too new or groundbreaking. But just to show what's doing it, yeah, it's a very good call out, very good point. So all of those flags, and if you're going to pass in none in developer locally, you do it via the command line. However, under advanced parameters here and then MFTF parameters, you will see that there is an MFTF debug level, which is set to default, which is how we want it to be in build. But if again, for some reason you're wanting to run a newer version of MFTF to older branches that still have broken XSD validation, you just change it right here to one of the values. It keeps scrolling up for some reason to one of the values over there.
Do you have auto refresh on the page on? Because I don't do it.
For sure, probably.
Yeah.
For sure I do.
Also, if you are contributing to Magento 2 repo or any other Magento open source project, all of these tests will be running with default flag. So you will, if you will have some XML violation there, you will see this in a little report.
Mm-hmm.
In the console output.
In the console level.
In a console.
The build will fail.
Yeah, the build will fail.
It'll fail early even. It'll fail before running the tests.
Yes.
Fail like red bubble or fail like yellow bubble?
Red.
Do you use yellow bubbles for anything?
No. Internally, I don't think we make use of warning bubbles at all.
Okay.
Very binary.
Any other
Like
questions, guys?
Well, if we have no more questions, we did have something that Alex wanted to show off from one of the upcoming MFTF releases that everybody would probably be pretty interested in.
So that's the future where we're going. That's our next release. Will include this feature. So just wanted to share what we are doing and where we're going with this.
So,
Basically, what we did, we included step keys into each action. So on your Aloo reports, it will be easier to debug your test and understand where this action is coming from what action group or from which test file. So you will be just copy paste your step key and search in test. So that's the biggest feature of next release we will include. And the other one is that all XML comments, native XML comments, will be treated as a comment action. So if you have something like this, if you will add the native XML comment, it will be printed in your Aloo report or your CLI report. So you can comment your code and see what pieces of test is currently run, what piece of test is currently run. So that's what we will have next release.
Yeah. Well, one of the big points of this is that right now in our code base, we have people who make a comment like this, like skip this, or work around step or something like that, right? Like leaving a little paper trail for other people looking at the test, not going to be needed anymore. You can just do the native commenting like that.
It's gonna make a lot of people really happy.
Yeah.
It's been a highly requested feature upgrade for a while.
And it's going to make the test code base cleaner, right? Like the shorter you can make the test, the better. If you're just duplicating lines just for the sake of comment, then why? Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions on this?
Well, sounds good.
Sounds good. That's it, I think. Thank you for joining us. And see you soon with the next demo release.
Yep. Slide deck is going to be available to everybody that are invited, and we can post it in the community channel as well. It's pretty small, so that's slide deck. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Cheers.
Wow.